Good afternoon, Dr.
Good afternoon.
Jules. It's such an honor and a pleasure to speak with you. My name is Jessia James, and I am a member of the Carib'Excellence program. So I just want to ask you, how are you feeling today?
I'm good, Jessia. I'm
Yes.
happy to sit with you and talk.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How was your day?
They went fine.
Okay, so my first question to you today is, as the Director General of the OECS, can you tell us about your career leading to your appointment?
Well, my career started, strangely enough, as a postgraduate dropout from the University of the West Indies. I went to UWI and did a first degree in English and linguistics. But while I was on campus, I started studying. I audited all classes taught by Dr. Ralph Gonzalez, who was a lecturer in political science, because I was a political radical and I wanted to follow all of his work. And got involved with the student movement in Barbados at Cave Hill. And then the Grenada Revolution happened.
Yes.
And Ralph recruited me and a couple other St. Lucians to go work in the revolution. Now, because I had done linguistics and English, Maurice Bishop asked me to help organize a national literacy campaign in Grenada. So I did that, and we set up something called the Center for Popular Education, the CPE, which ran the national literacy campaign. But after the campaign, a year later, we turned every school in Grenada by night into an adult education center, literally every school on the island. And there was a structured program of 4 levels of education that could take you right up to what was then CXC Basic, sorry.
Okay.
So with CXC Basic, you could then go on to do general, and then you could go on to university or decent wage employment and so on. And the government actually passed a law that required that all workers in the country be given a period of time to get a CPE level 4 certificate so that new doorways of opportunity will be open to them. We wrote our own textbooks and everything for that, and the government was so impressed that they made me permanent secretary for education, youth, women, and social affairs. I was 22 years old at the time.
Wow.
So, following the collapse of the revolution, I came back to St. Lucia. I worked with the National Research and Development Foundation as a consultant under Mrs. Pat Charles. And then I started doing literacy work for the government of St. Lucia through NRDF to help organize what became eventually NEP, the National Literacy Program in St. Lucia. And then I left NRDF and went to do my PhD at the University of Wisconsin in education policy. I did a master's and then a PhD. And immediately I finished that program, I got employed by the International Council for Adult Education with the responsibility for running literacy networks worldwide. This is something called the International Literacy Support Service. That was a decade of literacy by the UN. So at the end of that stint, I became permanent secretary for education in St. Lucia. And that's when I set up NELP and as an ongoing adult, same drawing from the lessons of the Grenada experience. Worked with government for 7 years to try to transform education in St. Lucia. And then I worked at Cable and Wireless for a period of 4 years as head of HR for the Cable and Wireless for the OECS. It was an interesting experience because it was a venture into the corporate world that I learned a lot about in terms of value and commercial operations and so on, value for money operations. It was a time when Cable and Wireless was moving from monopoly to competition. So it was a time of great organizational transformation for the business. And then I left there to become Registrar and Chief Executive of the Caribbean Examinations Council, where I worked for 7 years. One of my achievements was setting up new subjects like digital media and so on. And then we also computerized the entire operation of CXC. So the beginnings of what is now online marking and all of that was done then. So, and then I left CXC to become Director General of the OECS. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's a lot in a nutshell. You've done a lot of work throughout your career, especially in the educational sector with CXC and working with Grenada and taking the initiatives that you did there and implementing them here in St. Lucia.
Well, not exactly implementing, but there's a lot of modification.
Okay.
I think in one's career, you have a responsibility to be always inventive, to be transformational, and to always learn the lessons of both your successes as well as your failures in order to move things to a different level.
Well, given your work within the educational sector, and you said being a transcender leader, transitional and wanting this generation and helping the educational system, my next question for you is, what are some of the benefits within the OECS when it comes to education in the Eastern Caribbean?
Well, first of all, I think we have a relatively high standard of higher education in the OECS. OECS students have always done well at UWI, and the community colleges have a relatively sound foundation. What has happened from the inception is that through the OECS, the colleges work closely together, and the efforts have been made to more and more bring them closer and closer together in an articulation. There was a concept enunciated about 10 years ago of the idea of having centers of excellence in the different colleges. In fact, I was part of a consulting team at the time with Professor Errol Miller that helped to develop that concept. We were proposing that each of the community colleges in the OECS choose at least one area of specialization that is important for the region as a whole and for them. But that would be they will then become the OECS Center of Excellence there. And students from the other OECS territories would attend their college to pursue studies in that area. So for example, the BVI, because they were very into marine studies and so on, they wanted to be the Center of Excellence for Marine Studies. St. Lucia proposed to be the Center of Excellence for ICT. And other countries chose other areas of specialization. Unfortunately, it never fully materialized because, as you can imagine, this was going to be a costly venture, because it means each community college would have to have the means of accepting students from the other territories to be part of the cohort. And so accommodation, the cost of living for them and so on would have to be factored in. But we still have that concept in mind, and we are working ultimately towards that goal. And now, since COVID, with the onset and the greater prominence of distance learning, I think it is very possible for us to achieve this.
Thank you very much. So you worked with the OECS to help for each community college to have a strategic area of focus on what they want to do, what exactly they want to promote within the Caribbean. So my next question is, given the objectives of the OECS to promote cooperation, harmonization, and integration among its member states, just like each community college within the Caribbean, do you think that we have achieved these objectives?
Well, it's a journey. We have made progress, but let's put it this way, in a sense it's a never-ending journey. Why? Not because you can fix certain objectives that you want to achieve on the road, but remember the conditions in the world are constantly changing. And so as life changes on our planet, we have to adjust to those changes. So while we've come a long way in terms of cooperation, the OECS, all of the ministries of education, for example, have an education development plan that is harmonized with as an OECS development plan. We have harmonized curricula from primary school level. But once you hit secondary level, well, from early childhood up to primary, secondary you have the CXC as a harmonized curriculum. And we are constantly innovating on that. Since COVID, as I mentioned earlier, the whole question of the locus of learning has moved from just being the school to also include in the home the idea of online education. And we think that that's going to be a permanent feature of life going forward. So one of the things, there are a number of initiatives we're working on in the OECS now. We're working, for example, on a digital EMIS system, Education Management Information System, that would be based on your cell phone app that from teachers to administrators would use, and even parents would have access to that. So imagine you send your child to school on a Monday morning, and when the teacher does the roll call, even on their cell phone, to make sure that all the students are present, if your child is missing, you can get an automatic alert saying that your child is not in school today. Now, if you know you dropped him at school, him or her at school, it sends an alert to you. If you know that they were sick, then you can then send in a sick report to the teacher. So it makes it very easy for the administration of the school at all levels, and an education officer at his or her desk at the ministry or in the district office would see the attendance records for that day of all schools in their district, right? The aggregated results. So it becomes a very powerful tool for making the administration of education more efficient and easier. We are also working on a number of initiatives that have to do with improving at the primary level literacy, reading ability. In fact, there was a project we ran with USA that was so successful, having achieved significant progress in children's reading ability, that we actually decided at the end of the project, when there were still funds left over, even after having accomplished the goals, that we should move from helping students to become better readers to also become good writers, and challenge these students to write some of their own books. So right now, we have about over a dozen books, storybooks, that have been written by the students who were in primary school, who were formerly part of the reading program. And these are published with their names as authors, right? So there's a lot of opportunity, and that's why I say it's a journey, because every time you reach a plateau, the sky is still above you, and then you can still aspire to go higher.
Yes, thank you. Like you said, the journey is constantly going and going. The journey is constantly going and going, and you're always striving for success and reaching to the sky and what you can achieve next. And with all these innovative measures that the OECS has taken, challenging students and students adapting to online learning and coming out of online learning, my final question for you today is about these students and the children all in the OECS. So my question is, what would be your message to the youth who aspire to become future leaders in the Caribbean, and as such would like to continue the legacy of the OECS?
Yeah, well, first of all, the foundation of your future is the quality of your education. So that has to be taken seriously. And you have to strive to be the best that you can be in whatever is your field of endeavor. The other second thing we need to recognize, we are no longer at a historical moment when a single career will do. I mean, in my time, in my parents' time, you can choose a career and that's your career for life. It would not happen like that. It's not happening like that anymore. You now have opportunities where people do multiple careers. So you could be, for example, a great musician or artist, and you can still be a lawyer, a surgeon, something else, and be successful at all of them. What is also important too is that we see happening in today's world a sort of interdisciplinarity come into play in careers. So, you know, there's a TED, I don't know if you've heard of TED Talks.
Yeah.
There's one I would highly recommend. A lot of the young people I mentor, I ask them to view that TED Talk. It's by a guy called Matt Ridley, who's from Oxford University, but who's also a member of the British Parliament. And the title of the TED Talk, curiously enough, is What Happens When Ideas Have Sex. Right? It's a fascinating thing, because what he shows is that just as in biology, the mating of different species could result in new mutations occurring, the mating and the fusion of ideas can lead to new products and new things happening. Right? So you find the most unlikely combination of possibilities happening. And there's a story of somebody, an architect, who was designing the greatest, had the greatest ideas of new forms and shapes for buildings, but was unable to bring that to fruition because the materials didn't exist that could do that. Neither was there, did he master the mechanics of the form to make it real of the computer. And he engaged somebody who had done a life study on the butterfly wings, because butterflies, despite how fragile they are, for the scale of size, their wings are extremely strong. And so that knowledge went in, combined with the work of a material scientist, looking at different combinations of material. They were able to create new forms of a sort of ferroconcrete that made it possible for that architecture to become a reality. So, you know, the possibilities are endless. And I would encourage young people to not think in silos, right? But look at ways in which you can combine and fuse the knowledge that you have in all domains to make it helpful. The second and really critical thing too, it's not just about the academics, it's also about character. And how you deal with people, how you treat people is very important. So the old adage about good manners, being raised properly, is very important, and I think we have to pay attention to those things. That so-called soft side of education needs to be attended to. It's about attitude, and as has been often said, your attitude determines your altitude. I would sooner hire somebody to work at the OECS who may not be as qualified as somebody with a PhD, but who has the right attitude to work, who is hungry to learn, and who is anxious to achieve.
So thank you, Dr. Didacus JULES, for your time today. Like I said, it was a pleasure and an honor to speak to you. I've learned so much from this interview, and I know that the youth and everyone watching will learn so much as well. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.